welcome to the next episode of Brain Injury Group's Evolving Minds podcast, where we share insights, guidance, and information to individuals and families who've suffered a brain injury or the professionals supporting them. Today, I'm joined by Sneha from our lovely sponsors, Abilities Enabled. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
We're going to be talking about why complex care packages fail and what we can do to try and prevent that. But I think just to start, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about Abilities Enabled as well.
Of course. First of all, thank you for having me. It's nice to finally see, the things that take place behind the scenes. So it's been an absolute privilege. My name is Sneha. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Abilities Enabled. Abilities Enabled is a CQC regulated complex care provider in the UK. We provide at-home TDDI nursing and complex care services for both adults and pediatrics across the UK.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think that's a key point. You do cover children right through to adults, and that consistency of support and service as somebody progresses through their life. So we're going to be talking about complex care packages and why sometimes they fail. It's a really challenging area to work in. Everybody's needs are very different, and obviously in the area in which we work in within brain injury, quite nuanced. From your perspective and some of the things you've seen through the work that you're doing with Abilities Enabled and some of the clients and families that you work with, why do you think, what are the key themes that you see, the trends about why things maybe aren't as successful as they could be?
I can boil it down to three key points. The first point, which I think is probably something that you face as well, Claire, and that just seems to be a communication gap between the key stakeholders involved in any package. Within AE, we call it the tripod problem. So picture a stool, picture a tripod. You've got one leg that is represented by the deputy and the case manager, the second leg that's represented by the family or the key family stakeholders, and the third leg that's represented by the care provider. Now, it's all well and good, each leg of the tripod, everyone's doing the right thing by the service user, but it's not always necessarily the same thing. So we need these three legs to be working together, and that involves having open and honest conversations about what is working for the service user and what isn't. And sometimes that means, one of these legs developing a thicker skin and going, maybe I'm not the right person to be making this decision, and stepping back. And I can speak as a care provider. Sometimes we're not often the best care providers for a certain client group. There might be somebody better suited for it. For instance, the family might need somebody that can speak their local language, and that is not necessarily something we always provide, that we always endeavor to provide. And that's totally fine. That means they need somebody who can bridge that linguistic gap. But we need to understand that all three legs are holding up the service user's best interests. The same goes for the case manager or the deputy. If the care package or the care company provides them with evidence of why certain things aren't working, whether it be a cost risk analysis or, slashing costs here might mean greater clinical risks down the line, then that is something that leg needs to act on. And yeah, so that's back down to the tripod problem. It's about accountability, but ensuring that these three legs hold up the best interests of the service user.
I think that's a really valid point, and I think that communication angle of that and everybody talking to each other and being open and honest about what's going on, that's been a massive theme throughout all of the podcasts that we've done. No matter what we've been talking about, the key to everything has always been that communication has to be good, it has to be strong, and it has to involve everybody, and it has to involve the family or the individual concerned, because there's so many changes to their life, and you as a care provider and your team are a huge part of that, and a very personal part of that as well.
Absolutely. We've seen cases where case managers and deputies make decisions completely independently of what the family want. As the care provider, of course, we have healthcare assistants and nurses going in, day out, interacting with the service user as well as their families, and they know what's happening on the ground. So something that might seem operational on paper doesn't necessarily mean it works in real life. It could be a language problem, as I mentioned, or the family completely Obviously, in many cases with brain injury, there's an inherent mistrust of the medical services or the healthcare services. So suddenly having these nurses come on board, it can be quite jarring to a family. These are individuals who are having their privacy, their personal space invaded on a daily basis. So it's about working with the family to ensure that this is put in place. It's about hand-holding and ensuring communication takes place in an open and honest, completely transparent way. More respectful than anything else. But that's how you ensure that complex care packages survive. And if that fundamental communication and lack of trust and lack of respect is there from the very beginning, that's an easy predictor for a complex care package failing.
Yeah, absolutely. So tripod effect,
Tripod effect.
point one.
Point on, yeah.
So what about the other two areas that you think are key in identifying the success or otherwise of a care package?
I think is a good segue would be, we talked about accountability and communication with the tripod effect. Of course, it's open, honest, respectful communication. But one thing that we didn't discuss was accountability. Now, we talk about accountability with the tripod, but we need to go down to accountability at the grassroots level, which is your healthcare assistants going in to the house to perform these high intervention clinical, high acuity clinical interventions. I find it baffling, having come as an outsider to the care world, about how taxi drivers are regulated. Everyone needs a driver's license to drive, but your healthcare assistant performing tracheostomy on you at 3 a.m. is not regulated. That is baffling, but I think it needs to be an industry shift where we need to have accountability for healthcare assistants, very akin to the NMC pin that nurses have. There needs to be a system that ensures that healthcare assistants are registered on this. And their training is up to date in accordance to that. Training levels need to be standardized. A competency check needs to be standardized across the board. It is baffling to me that you're willing to let somebody who's only just been trained in tracheostomy going in to perform tracheostomy. Yeah. And that is okay on an industry CQC regulation level. Of course, care providers such as ourselves take all the measures needed to ensure that this individual is upskilled, has the experience, etc. We risk assess and risk mitigate till we're blue in the face to ensure that nothing happens. But that's, again, holding the care provider or the case manager responsible for a variable they can't control. And that's why that level of accountability has to be at the healthcare assistance level.
Absolutely. And it's a positive thing for the healthcare assistants. It's good for their ongoing development and engagement and support and to help them have a better understanding of their job and what's needed and how to support that individual.
Absolutely. We've had these conversations with our healthcare assistants as well. Many of them are so passionate about what they do and they want an industry-wide recognition of the services that they provide. And what a better way of doing that, providing them that recognition than regulating it, ensuring that that's there, ensuring that there's a clear career path for them. Now, in the NHS, you do have, bands 3, 4, 5, and then move on up to nursing. What if we could provide that in a regulated fashion? So there's a clear career path for them as well, with areas of specialism, especially in the brain injury world. In the area that we provide services, an individual, a healthcare assistant can go in at level X and then can specialize in pediatrics brain injury or adult brain injury with, with a bipolar disorder. Yeah. What does training for that look like? What does training for somebody who has witnessed an accident look like? What does trauma-informed training look like to support family members of people with brain injuries? And there are clear learning development paths that can be offered to healthcare assistants, but that all starts with regulating it and registering it at a professional level at the grassroots.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very important. They do a wonderful job, healthcare assistants, and recognizing that job and giving them the means to have that recognition through the accountability and training and development is really the only way I think that we're going to see the support that our families who come to us for help and support and we look at why their care packages have failed or challenges they may be facing, having those healthcare assistants be able to support themselves and look at where their careers are going and giving them those opportunities is only going to be beneficial for those families, I think.
Absolutely. So the reason why complex care packages, the second reason why they fail, is because oftentimes these healthcare systems aren't held accountable. So I'm just looking at a typical scenario where, for instance, we've got a new client coming on board. We've got 6 weeks to start building a care package for them, building a care team for them. And we obviously start recruitment. And that's great. But as part of the recruitment process, we contact, we get employment references, and it's very basic, the information that you get from another care company.
Yeah.
So you can have a healthcare assistant that's been completely neglectful of their client, and that doesn't necessarily show on their employment records. There's no way of holding them accountable for their actions. And as a result, you don't necessarily know if they've shown up for shifts on time. You don't necessarily know if they're up to speed with their training. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that the care package is safe and sustainable to provide that level of care for the service user. If only there was a mechanism to ensure that all of those background checks take place as thoroughly as possible. As a complex care provider, I would want that in place.
Yeah.
To ensure that those
And the
checks are
family
taking
would
place
as well, surely, that, you know,
Exactly.
where do they don't even know where to start and what they're looking for, do they? And they're reliant on you as an organisation to say, we've done all those checks, we know where our people are, we know how trained they are, we know how skilled they are.
Exactly. But you also need to bear in mind that these family members, again, have this inherent mistrust of all health and social care services.
Yeah.
So how wonderful would it be in an ideal scenario down the line where you've got an individual with an ID card registered as a professional healthcare assistant, and all the family member needs to do is scan the code, and it shows up their registration, their employment history, and all their training up to date, and who they've been signed off with. If I were a family member of somebody with a brain injury, I would definitely sleep better at night knowing the fact that I have done those checks myself.
Yes.
And I'm confident that this individual is able to, I don't know, peg feed my husband or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's that reassurance, but it needs to be a systemic reassurance and a systemic holding of accountability.
That's the industry.
Absolutely. And that would be the second reason why complex care packages fail, but how we can prevent that. And I'm quite excited to ensure that this industry shift takes place.
Yeah, no, I agree. It seems like a passion of yours, and I think it's a much needed change and development. So the third reason then that you think sort of key area that packages potentially fail.
Okay, I'm going to sound a bit like a nerd over here. My background is economics and management consulting, so please bear with me. So coming in as an outsider to this industry, though I have worked in this industry for about 3 years now, coming in as a relative outsider, the CQC asks you to measure your common indicators, like the number of missed shifts, the number of hospital admissions, the number of medication errors, the number of medication incidents, concerns, etc. But these are all lagging indicators that's indicative of something that's already gone bad. We need to be measuring leading indicators. So I think an immediate thing that I would think of as a COO of a complex care company or any complex care company would be, how can I prevent a problem from actually taking place to begin with? A common systemic issue that I've seen in the last 3 years has been employee burnout. This industry is one of the highest attrition rates, right up there with hospitality. In a weird way, we're between healthcare services and hospitality because we're in people's homes. So it's not surprising that it's in the high 40s or the high 40 percentages. So checking in on employee burnout is a huge indicator. The second indicator would, and the best way to measure that, would be to see the number of shifts that have been covered by the same core care team versus others. So if, for instance, Claire, I'm volunteering you for this. You were scheduled for a shift, but you didn't show up, and instead, I don't know, Lillian had to show up for the shift instead of you. That indicates that a core member of the care team did not attend and somebody else did. So you did not attend for a specific reason. So if I see that this is taking place maybe 3 times in the course of a month, I would give you a call and go, okay, what's up? Talk to me. Have an open conversation with me. It could be because you're doing far too many shifts, or you're just exhausted because of the intensity of each shift. The more so that's one indicator of potential employee burnout, and that's an easy step in, because I can say, okay, Claire, let's pare you back. Maybe you don't do this, and obviously you're worried about the money. We can find this instead. So juggle shifts between two different packages. So you're not dealing entirely with the high intensity one, and instead you're balanced out. That way, there's no employee attrition, you don't leave, and the package is still stable. We're providing consistent, stable care for the individual.
Yeah.
That would be number one. The second would be it's not just missed shifts, but it's the number of escalations. Then again, coming back to the tripod problem, the number of escalations either from the family about something is not quite working, or the number of escalations from the care provider to the deputy or the case manager to say, hey, I know you've given us a very strict budget, but the operational requirements of this package are far higher than, what you have costed for. Let's have a conversation again. And if those signals are missed, if those escalations are not addressed, then that is a potential problem. So it's the number of escalations and whether they've been addressed or not, or in a metric term, it would be number of escalations and time to resolve said escalation. That is really important, and that is something that needs to be addressed. If your care provider or care company is reaching out and calling for help, it is your duty as the case manager and the court of protection deputy to go, okay, let's talk about how we ensure that this care package is as sustainable as possible.
Yeah, and people's needs aren't static, are they? Especially with a brain injury, and it's an invisible thing. It's difficult to look at somebody and go, these are the things that you're going to need. You're only going to know some of those when you're in there delivering the care package. It's going to be those day-to-day things that perhaps weren't as obvious when somebody's done an assessment, but when you're in there, your team are in there every single day in somebody's lives, you're able to see those things better, and having that ability to adapt and flex, but share those views with the deputy or the case manager so that changes or discussions can be had about what might be better for that individual is going to be valuable from that data that you've assessed and reviewed and been able to share and talk about.
Absolutely. I can give you an example of this one client that we have. Well, they're an indirect client because they were witness to a road accident that led their loved one to be the loved one had a traumatic brain injury and they're still in hospital. But this individual witnessed the entire thing, and as a result, they started receiving care because they were unable to sleep at night and presenting with behaviors that challenged. So there was an emergency care provision enabled for them, and we stepped in to start providing that service. But again, with something like PTSD or trauma, witnessing trauma, it can present in different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean that one day is great, the next day can be horrific, but it's adapting to those changes. And if as the care provider you go in and you're enabling that care provision, but you're seeing these changes, or you notice that this individual is actually having a bit of a panic attack every time they hear ambulance sirens in the background, that is informative. That is useful information that then gets fed back to the case manager and the deputy to go, I think this person needs a proper PTSD assessment, and then we can ensure that the right support is then enabled for them, But that only happens if this communication flow keeps taking place, because otherwise, if our healthcare assistants on the ground are not trained to deal with managing these behaviors that challenge in the way that specific individual needs, that is prone to package failure down the line. So it's about ensuring that your interventions are tailored in the best way possible to your service user, but that can only happen if it's underpinned by these channels. But you can track that with these metrics by ensuring escalations are actually managed and closed after a certain point. So that's another indicator that I think is quite leading. Something that we use very proactively. I'm sure some of the case managers that I deal with are sick of hearing from me. But on the plus side, we have managed to keep those packages as stable as possible. And I think having those open and honest conversations about the risk trade-offs with your case managers and the deputies are very useful because they understand the language of risk. And if you say, if you don't do this, it's because of this, and this is what's going to potentially happen, people take up and take notice.
We've talked about those reasons, those three sort of key areas that sort of cross over a little bit as well, don't they, in terms of why those packages fail. What do you think are the differences or the solutions or the things that happen in a we've talked a little bit about that, but that happen in a good care package that is consistent and stable, that are the key areas about keeping that right for the individual and their outcomes and their supporting them in the best way?
I think the best care packages are when the care company gets involved at the very beginning or as early as possible. So that's really useful because the care company goes in, these healthcare assistants and nurses go in to start working with the service user while the assessment behind the scenes to determine what the future of this individual is going to look like are still taking place. And it would be a lot easier for the deputy and the case managers to start building a case for this individual based on the information that a care company is able to provide. So that way the quantum or whatever the final figure is that this individual receives is conducive and beneficial for them in the long run. I once received a call. We get contacted as a company. We get contacted quite often when complex care packages are failing. Yeah. It's usually from parents in distress or family members in distress, but also from lawyers, solicitors, and case managers. So we usually get contacted when something is going horrifically wrong. One of the people that I met was this mum of a child, and she'd already received the settlement, but she didn't have nurses. She was expected to manage the care package entirely by herself, and she had a thriving career prior to all of this, and now here she was having to provide deep suctioning on her own child. And that's scary. And she said, I'm unable to find reliable staff that can come in and provide this. As a mum, I physically do not have the time to ensure that my 29-year-old child is able to get the deep suctioning that she needs. And this mum is growing old as well, right? How is she going to provide the moving and handling support and the rest of it? Now, if only she had a care company go in there whilst the assessments were still taking place and not a care expert who hasn't had that hands-on involvement already, then that would be so much more informative to the case and the amount of money that the child and the mum needed to receive. Adults with brain injuries still being looked after by their parents, it can be quite scary because the parents are growing old. There are moving and handling requirements, there's deep suctioning requirements. There's only so much that an individual can take on. And at the end of the day, we want to give these individuals a chance to reclaim their own lives, get back to normalcy as much as possible. So I think that entire scenario could have been prevented if the care company had intervened further upstream, a lot earlier in the entire process. That's number one. That's one way we can.
It goes back to that tripod effect and that communication between all parties at the right time, doesn't it? And something you mentioned earlier about something that works operationally on paper, in the real life, and as well, you're going into people's homes and lives, and it's their family, and you've got to be able to work with that family and in their home, and that's valuable, having that insight from somebody who does that every single day. I think is really important. So yeah,
it's those back and forth communication channels. We've had mums and family members. There was a recent case of. This is like a good problem to have, so I will use a positive story where the wife acquired a brain injury 3 years ago, and we took on her case a year after she was discharged from hospital a year after the brain injury, and we took on her case within 2 months of her coming out of hospital. And when we took on her case, she was not fully mobile, but she was walking. She wasn't fully mobile though, and she wasn't verbal. And it was interesting. Pre-injury, she was able to speak her native language as well as English. But then post-injury, we realized that she was only able to retain information if conveyed to her in her native tongue. So we built a care team around her of people of the same age as she was. So they were more her friends, and therapists, and they all spoke the same language. And that was really useful because we worked so closely with the speech and language therapist to anchor a lot of the words that she was using to her core memories from back in her native region. And that was really useful. And, since then we've supported her on 5 international holidays. She's now running behind her daughter, having arguments with her husband about the state of their garden. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful story. Yeah. This is what we do. We ensure that the right infrastructure is in place, and having those open conversations with the case manager and deputy were fantastic. It was such a wonderful team to work with. But in this instance, the husband, God bless him, I wish we had done more for him as an individual, because this is a gentleman that witnessed his wife's accident, saw her go through that entire journey of hospital admission to coming back home and surgery and then rehab services to slowly get back to where she was. But all of this has happened in such a short span. He needed that additional support as well. And it could be a shock to the system, but it's about ensuring that the family is involved along every step of the way. And that is a wonderful story of something that has gone very positively. And they no longer need our services, which is even better, which is great, which means that she is able to live her best life without the need for additional care intervention. And that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great outcome for that family, isn't it?
Fantastic outcome. Yeah. But it's about ensuring that the family is equipped to deal with these changes, because they've gone through that trauma. But it's important that they are brought on that journey of this person's
It's a big change to their lives as well. Yes, obviously the focus is on the individual who's had the injury, but their families' lives have often hugely changed as well. Their children are having to go to school while things are very different for mum at home. Her husband's having to navigate, well, normally I would be doing this at work, but actually how am I going to manage that, about the new family life, and wanting to still be that family. And I think it's valuable to have that support of an organisation that sees that as well, and brings, like you say, brings them along, so that ultimately, if there is the opportunity for that individual to not need your services, the family also feel well supported and equipped to if she is having a bad day or whatever, or and then they've also had the opportunity to adapt to what life looks like now.
Yeah, and that's even better. We will do everything that we can to ensure that journey to normalcy, or as near to normalcy, is enabled. And should they need us down the line, even to pick up the phone and go, hey, I'm just having a shitty time, we would be happy to support. We'd be happy to support. But that's what we're there for. That's what we're the only reason we've been able to do this is because the tripod stood strong. And we were able to have these conversations from the very beginning. And that was a successful story.
Yeah. I think that communication, again, it's hugely important. It feels like a small thing, but actually, from all sides, being able to communicate well and share your thoughts and feelings. I know a lot of the families that come to us asking for help, sometimes some of the challenges that they've had are just because they felt not listened to, and they're not asking for anything that's going to change the world. But actually, if somebody had listened to them at the beginning, that could have had a big impact on their outcomes and what their life looks like now.
We had a very similar package as well, where it was the wife that acquired a brain injury, and they had a child, and the child obviously saw mummy pre-accident, saw mummy post-accident, but growing up now, and then started realizing my mummy doesn't look very much like the other mummies the other mummies in my school. And the child started acting out. Now, we had 2 healthcare assistants provide support to this lovely lady with the acquired brain injury, but they were also at the same time dealing with a child in the home that was trying to get their attention, clearly, and acting out and presenting with what one would normally call as behaviors that challenge. Now, under a normal circumstance, that would mean the healthcare assistants go, I can't deal with this nightmare anymore, and then leave the care package. Again, the lack of accountability, but it's also the lack of the communication flow. So if, as a care company, you take a look at this trend and you go, okay, why are they finding the shifts to be a lot harder than they normally should be? Well, it's because they're suddenly expected to manage the behaviors of a child that's acting out and asking for help. This is where the care company then goes, all right, tripod situation. Contact the case manager and say, maybe this child might need additional support because they have seen the mummy before and now mummy after. And there's a certain need that is not being met. Are there certain things that we can do to support this child as well? Tripod effect kicks in. The case manager then identifies either a nanny or after school activities for this child to then do. But also the OT comes into place and helps this mum, or puts into plan a treatment plan for this mum to play a bigger role. What does her role as mummy look like to meet the needs of this child? And all of this is only possible if that communication flow takes place. But as the care provider on the ground, it is up to us to recognize these signs and signals and put together an action plan that enables this. If that doesn't take place, package failure. If it does take place, then of course you've got a much better bond between mum and child now, and things are a lot more stable.
Our Adult Brain Injury Conference is taking place on the 11th and 12th of June 2026 at the Lowry in Salford Quays, Manchester. It brings together legal, healthcare and case management professionals for 2 days of expert insight, discussion and collaboration, focused on improving outcomes for adults with brain injury. The conference is APIL accredited and delegate tickets are available on the Brain Injury Group website. Search Adult Brain Injury Conference to find out more.
So you mentioned that you contacted a few times when families are in crisis. Maybe they've had a care package that's not been successful. They're already distrustful of services, and then their care package that was put in place, they've got a family member who, has had a really significant event and they're just hugely in crisis, the family. What would be your first steps as Abilities Enabled when you're contacted by that family to help to ensure that you can put in a stable package for them and support them in what they need?
I think the first step really would be to have independent conversations with the tripod. So that would be the case manager, the deputy, then the family, about why packages have failed in the past. It would be good to understand from all three perspectives about why this has happened. Oftentimes it can just be because the family are just not used to strangers in their house, and as a result they make the environment really hostile for healthcare assistants to be there. And you know what, that's fine. We are invading your personal space, and that's fine. But then surely there's a way we can navigate this. There's got to be a different way of dealing with this, and that means maybe the healthcare assistants need a separate space that they enter from and they use for their own needs, and then come in to intervene only when needed. So that way they're steering clear of the family space. So maybe it's about respecting those boundaries. Or it could be because of something totally different. It could be radical changes in the clinical needs over the last couple of years, and as a result, previous healthcare providers have not been able to meet the demands of the clinical demands of the service user. And that again is totally fine. If we can put mechanisms and identify leading indicators for that particular package. As COO, I have KPIs for each package, but I also have overarching KPIs. So what does good look like for that very specific service user? So I think that would be my first two steps. Identify what went wrong previously, and then the second would be to identify what good looks like. That conversation of what good looks like usually takes place in two phases. Stage number one would be us as an Abilities Enabled team sitting together with our clinical lead, as well as the few healthcare assistants that we think would be suitable for that particular package, sitting together with them to go, right, what does good look like for this individual from a clinical perspective? What does good look like for this particular family from a peace of mind perspective? So, they don't feel like someone's grossly invading their personal space. And what does good look like for the litigation or the case management perspective. Maybe the case manager is just juggling multiple cases and doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with therapy services. That's fine. That is something that we can absolutely support with. Or maybe the litigation is so intense they need extreme details in their documentation. Again, not a problem. That is something that can be inbuilt into our system when it comes to care logs and care documentation that the care team provide anyway. It's just the level of detail that we would need to capture. Totally fine. So what does good look like on all these phases? And then we work together with the tripod, with the family and the case manager and deputy, and goes, this is what we believe good looks like. What are your thoughts on the matter? And this is where these conversations take place to refine and, design and iterate what a successful care package looks like for this individual. Once that's identified, then care planning takes place and we start shadow shift. Now, in these cases where the packages have failed, there is no previous care provider for us to shadow. So that means we're going in there blind for all intents and purposes. And that's fine. By this point, I think we've built some trust with the family member to ensure that we can shadow them, because ultimately they know their loved ones the best more often than not. And we understand what house rules are. So that's, again, feeds back into the care planning process. Boundaries are drawn, but it's a trust building exercise at this phase with the family involved. They get familiar with the core care team. We start off very small with the core care team, and then we build out very slowly, depending on the level of trauma that this family has had with previous care companies as well. Again, more often than not, in situations like this, we try to ensure that we don't use too many bank staff. Now, as I've mentioned to you previously, we don't use agencies. The risks are too high. It's unregulated. There's no way of ensuring that these external HCAs can provide the level of service that we need. But it's about ensuring we often use bank staff as in people who work on similar packages and can provide the level of intense support that this needs. Shit happens, people fall sick, emergencies take place, so you do need bank staff in place. But these bank staff need to be introduced to the family from the very beginning. So that's part of the care team building process. And then once that's done, then we go live on the package and we start providing the active service that's been previously agreed. The first 120 days, as I mentioned to my tripod, it's a stabilization phase for any package, irrespective of how clinically complex it might be. The first 4 months, very, very hard, because it's everybody learning each other's rhythms. It's the family understanding how the healthcare assistants work. It's about the HCAs understanding what works for the family and what's not. The most trivial issues, such as where to keep the spoons, can blow up, right, into a full-blown problem. And most of these issues are never actually clinical. They're the trivial house admin stuff. It's like, oh, you take cups out of here and leave them in the sink. That's fine. It's part of house rules. We understand that you like things in a specific place, and we will respect that. At the end of the day, we are guests in somebody else's home. We're there to provide clinical interventions, but we are guests in their home, and we have to respect that. So it's about getting those understanding and really documenting those house rules, ensuring that the healthcare assistant care team know what they need to be abiding by, but also working closely with the family and the case managers to say, okay, this is what we've all agreed. If the goalposts move, okay, we need to know that. So then that can be redocumented or can be reevaluated at a later stage. First 120 days, everyone getting to know each other. It's the fitting in, and that's perfectly fine. But what we do mandate would be fortnightly meetings with the case manager and family, at least for the first 6 weeks, after which, if we assess that it's going okay, then it becomes monthly. But then we mandate monthly meetings for the first year at least, just to ensure that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. The tripod is standing strong. And it's only after that we start looking at other goals for this individual. So after the first 120 days have passed, then, okay, what are the goals we're trying to achieve? Let's no longer look at stabilizing the care package, but let's do the more fun stuff. Like, what are we trying to help this person achieve? And there are clinical goals that can be as small as this person was able to use the standing frame for 5 minutes, but I would like to stand in the standing frame for 10 minutes in the next 2 months. Not a problem. We will start measuring against those little clinical needs. Or it can be, I desperately want to go to Blackpool, and my mom has never let me go to Blackpool my entire life, and I now want to go to Blackpool. We will make that happen. How do we make that journey possible? Let's risk assess and take the measures needed. But that's always my favorite part, the development of the goals. And that takes place again with the help of the tripod. You've got your case managers, your therapists, your deputy going, just tell me how much it's going to cost and I'll let you know if it's available. And then we go, yep, this is how much it's going to be. We can pro bono a certain portion of it, and the rest can be borne by the client, but let's make this possible for them. And we've done it. We build these goals out for these individuals. I'm looking forward to one client of mine who's always wanted to come down to London and go on the Jubilee line. I don't know why, but we're going to make that possible for him, and I'm so excited about it. And he's got the entire tube map, and he's identified which line he wants to travel on, and we're going to do that for him. So it's about identifying these goals and then making that happen whilst monitoring the clinical integrity of the package the entire way through. But setting up a care package the first 120 days from the time of go live, and like the first, I would say 60 days prior to go live, are the most important.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of solutions to the care package problem, are there any sort of key things that you would look at, sort of goals, objectives that we've not covered already? I know we've talked a little bit around the communication and the tripod and the establishment of that trust with the family and the sort of parameters from a time perspective. But are there any other key bits that you think are important to think about, consider from a solutions perspective?
I think pulling myself out of the equation, pulling abilities enabled out of the equation, I think something that all case managers, deputies, and families individually can do is what to identify in a care provider. If there is medication administration or any sort of high acuity clinical intervention needed, you need to ensure that your care provider is TDDI registered. This is under the CQC regulation remit. If they're not, then they are providing, tracheostomy services, that is in direct violation of their CQC regulation. So that would be the first thing that is prone to failure right there. The second thing would then be, I would ask all care companies to start looking at leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. So don't look at just the missed shifts and, the percentage of hospital admissions or missed medication. Look at staff burnout. That is huge. High attrition industry already. Let's prevent that. And let's prevent package failure. Let's look at other elements that could possibly go wrong with a certain package. If you see there's a consistent trend with this individual waking up at night or requiring medical intervention, or you see a trend in how clinical interventions need to take place, feed that back to your tripod, feed that back to the case management community. Maybe there is additional support that is required for this individual, but keep a look out for these sort of clinical trends that are that could typically cause package failure, is my feedback. The third thing that I would say is more long-term, and that would be regulation or professional registration for healthcare assistants at the grassroots level. I'm very passionate about this, and I think it's about raising the standards of care delivery and the clinical standards of care delivery across the board in the UK, especially with the NHS already burdened. A lot of people, we were moving to the virtual ward system a while back, and that means more care is going to be delivered at home. Let's ensure that the infrastructure is in place and regulated to enable that.
Yeah, very, very key point there and important. So almost at the end now, but just to finish off, if somebody was to come and contact you and say, we'd like to speak to you about implementing a care package, either for our client, if it's a case manager or deputy, or for a family member asking that question, what can they expect? What's the process that you would go through of engaging with that family or individual and their professionals that are supporting them?
I would first have a conversation with them. I would prefer to have these conversations in person. So I think building that trust and the chemistry is always better in person. So you can get a better read of the individual and they get a better read of you as well. We want to present our best feet forward. Have an in-person meeting, ideally with both the case manager and the family together, to get an understanding of what each party wants, understand what's not worked for them in the past, but what has worked for them as well. So what do we want to keep and what do we want to change in terms of the care package design? And then the next phase would be co-designing, co-creating that what good looks like for the service user, and then start putting together this care team. And it could be, they can say, you know what, language barriers, as a result, I would prefer, I don't know, Hindi speakers in my house. It's not a problem. I will, given the fact that I can speak Hindi myself, I would probably have those early stages of conversations with the family in Hindi, but ensure that the case manager is kept in the loop in English. But it's about overcoming those barriers and making them feel as comfortable as possible through the process. And then ensuring that the right Hindi-speaking care team can be brought in. Maybe the family don't want young healthcare assistants. They might prefer older ones. They might prefer men as opposed to women, and that's fine. We can enable that. They might want a man of a similar age to the person with the acquired brain injury to be more a pal or talk football with them or take them to the pub for a pint occasionally. Totally fine. We'll feed that into the care program, but that's part of enabling them to live the best version of their lives. So then we start designing the care plan, which is the clinical interventions, but also their preferences. Here's how I like my tea. Here's how I like to wake up in the morning. I am really allergic to harsh sounds. I really don't like R&B music. Not a problem. All of that's baked into the care preferences sheet. And then we have, once the care team, in the meantime, goes through meet and greets, the family goes, yep, they look okay, I think they'd make a good fit for my family. Then we have an MDT meeting where the MDT then talk about the key elements of intervention that the service user needs. So it could be a physiotherapist saying, this is how this specific individual likes their therapy to be delivered, or when they are in the gym working out, bear in mind that, that the arm is in a certain position, whatever. Or the occupational therapist goes, this is what their OT goals are, and here's how you deliver them. So we have a 2-day training session for the entire care team, and then we go live. And then we measure on a fortnightly basis for the first 60 days, and then after that, a month. But it's about keeping that tripod up and strong and communication flowing throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like a really well thought out process to get to the right package for an individual, which is massively important.
We like to accommodate even the most trivial of preferences, but it makes such a difference to an individual's life.
It's an intrusion really on somebody's personal life, isn't it? And so you've got to get those little things right, I think.
We've got to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if the spoons belong to that specific drawer,
where they go.
They belong. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's all about ensuring it's comfortable for the family and the service user. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. I feel like I've talked too much.
No, always. It's always good
Enjoy
to
doing
chat.
this.
I think it's great to chat and share all those experiences as well. I think I've really enjoyed hearing about how you work at Abilities Enabled. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. All right.
Thank you for listening today. If you've got any questions or queries, please get in touch at inquiries@braininjurygroup.co.uk. If you've got any questions for Abilities Enabled, let us know. We can share your details and put you in touch with Sneha and the team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.